I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I just packed 2 suitcases, loaded them into the back of my car at 6:14 inches the morning, and drove away from the house I grew up in, without looking in the rearview mirror once. Not because I wasn't sad, because I knew if I looked back, I'd lose my nerve. That was 8 years ago. I was 22, 3 weeks out of college, and I had $847 in my checking account, a graphic design degree from a state school my father had called a glorified art class, and a job offer in Chicago that paid $38,000 a year. My father had laughed when I told him. Not a cruel laugh, just a dismissive one, the kind that said he'd already decided the conversation wasn't worth having. My brother had gotten a different reaction when he announced things. When my brother got a football scholarship to Ohio State, my father cried. Actual tears. Standing in the kitchen, holding the acceptance letter like it was something holy. My mother made his favorite dinner pot roast, homemade rolls, the good china, and they called every relative they had. I was 14. I had won a regional design competition that same week. My entry was a poster for a local nonprofit, and the judges had written that my work showed exceptional maturity and vision. I left the certificate on the kitchen counter hoping someone would notice. My father used it as a coaster. He didn't do it on purpose. That was almost worse. It just didn't register as something worth moving. I spent the next 8 years understanding my place in my family the way you understand weather, not something you cause, not something you can change, just something you learn to dress for. My brother was the sun. Everyone oriented toward him. His games, his stats, his future. When he blew out his knee junior year and lost the scholarship, my parents grieved for months like someone had died. When he pivoted to business school and then started a home renovation company in Columbus, they threw him a launch party. When clients came in slowly and revenue was thin in the first year, my mother called me. Not to talk. To ask for $5,000. Your brother needs a little bridge, she said. Just until the contracts come through. I was 24. I had been in Chicago for 2 years, living with a roommate, eating a lot of pasta, building a client base as a freelancer on top of my day job. I had $9,000 saved, which felt enormous to me, and apparently felt like a resource to my parents. I sent $3,000 less than they asked, more than I should have. I told myself it was a loan. My mother said my brother would pay me back within 90 days. He didn't. When I brought it up 6 months later, my father said, "He's still getting established. You have a steady paycheck. You can afford to be patient." I didn't say anything. That was the problem. For years, I didn't say anything. I kept building my life quietly, the way I'd always done. I got better clients, raised my rates, eventually went fully freelance. By 26, I was making more than my brother's entire company was grossing, and I knew that because my mother told me his numbers whenever she wanted to make a point about how hard he was working and how much he deserved support. I don't think she realized she was also telling me how well I was doing by comparison. I don't think she thought about me in terms of comparison at all. My brother was the story. I was just someone who lived in the same house for 18 years. The thing that finally broke something in me happened at Thanksgiving, 2 years before I left. I had driven 5 hours from Chicago to Cincinnati, brought a good bottle of wine, offered to help with the meal. At the table, my father gave a toast. He talked about my brother's company for 4 minutes, a new contract, a new hire, a renovation that had gotten written up in a local magazine. He mentioned my name once, at the end, almost as punctuation. And Claire's doing her little design thing out in Chicago. Her little design thing? I had invoiced $127,000 that year. I smiled. I ate the pot roast. I drove back to Chicago on Sunday morning and I started, for the first time, keeping a record. Not out of anger exactly. More out of a need to confirm my own reality. I started writing down every interaction dates. What was said. What was asked of me. What was given to my brother. I'm meticulous by nature. It's what makes me good at my work. I notice when things don't align. By the time I left 2 years later, I had documented $11,400 that had gone from my account to my parents or my brother directly, in amounts ranging from $200 to $3,000. Loans that were never repaid. Expenses that were framed as emergencies. I had the records. I left on a Tuesday in March. My father was at work. My mother was at her book club. I had already mailed a letter explaining that I needed space and that I would reach out when I was ready. I was not ready for 4 years. During those 4 years, I built something I was genuinely proud of. I moved into my own apartment in Lincoln Park. I grew my client base to the point where I was turning away work. I made friends who knew me as someone with a full, interesting life, not as a supporting character in someone else's story. I went to therapy. I learned what it felt like to sit at dinner and have someone ask what I was working on and actually wait for the answer. I was not unhappy. I want to be clear about that, because what happened next could make it sound like I was just waiting around for my family to re-enter my life. I wasn't. I had genuinely moved forward. The wound was still there, it doesn't go away. You just learn to stop pressing it, but I was not defined by it anymore. Then my phone rang on a Thursday afternoon in October, and the number was my mother's. I let it go to voicemail. Then I sat with the voicemail notification for 3 days before I listened to it. Her voice sounded older. She said she was calling because there was something serious she needed to tell me. Something about my brother, and she hoped I would call back. I didn't call back. I texted instead. "What's going on?" She called again. This time I picked up. "My brother had been in a car accident," she said. 2 weeks ago. He was okay walking, talking, no brain injury, but he had needed surgery on his shoulder, and the recovery was going to be long. He couldn't run his business while he was recovering. His wife was working, but they had medical bills, and he had employees depending on him, and the company was at risk. "We wouldn't ask if we didn't have to," she said. "But we've put in everything we have. We need $15,000, honey, just to bridge the gap until he's back on his feet." I kept my voice very flat. "How much are the medical bills?" "It's not just the bills. It's payroll. He has 3 employees." "How much are the medical bills specifically?" A pause. "I don't have the exact number in front of me. Can you send me documentation? The hospital bill? The surgical report? Something from his doctor?" Another pause. Longer. "Why do you need documentation?" "He's your brother." "Because I've sent money before and I want to understand what I'm helping with." She said she'd send something. She didn't sound happy about it. We hung up and I sat in my office for a long time staring at the wall. Here is what I knew. My brother's business had been struggling before I left. He had a wife. Now they'd gotten married 3 years ago. A small ceremony I had not been invited to, because my parents said they didn't know if I wanted to come after the distance I'd put between myself and the family. I knew her name. I had looked her up on social media the way you do when you're estranged, and curious, but too cautious to reach out. She seemed grounded, competent. She was a physical therapist, which meant she understood medical billing better than most people. I did not hear from my mother with documentation. What I heard, 6 days later, was a text that said, "We sent you the information. Please let us know by end of week. This is urgent." No information had been sent. I checked my email, my text thread, everything. Nothing. I texted back. "I haven't received anything. Can you resend?" Nothing. I called. Voicemail. I waited 4 days. I was starting to feel the old familiar guilt pulling at me, the one that said I was being cold, being difficult, that family was family, and I was making everything about documentation and money when my brother was hurt and struggling. I recognized the guilt. I had been in therapy long enough to know it wasn't always pointing me toward the right thing. Then my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I'm glad I did. "Is this Claire?" The voice was careful. Measured. A little nervous. "Yes. I'm your brother's wife. I got your number from his phone. I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything." I sat down. "Okay." She said she'd been trying to figure out how to make this call for 2 weeks. She'd found out recently that my parents had contacted me asking for money. She wanted me to know the truth before I sent anything. My brother had not had surgery. He had been in a minor accident, a fender bender in a parking lot, low speed, no injuries requiring hospitalization. He'd had some shoulder soreness and seen a physical therapist, her, actually, in a professional capacity, which was its own strange detail, and he was completely fine. no surgery, no medical bills beyond a standard copay. His business was not in crisis. It was doing reasonably well. Not exceptional, but stable. She was managing their finances, and she had not authorized any request for $15,000, nor did they need it. She had only found out my parents had contacted me because she had overheard a phone call. My mother had called my brother to tell him I was being difficult about the money. My brother had apparently not known she was asking me for money in his name. Or, he had known and hadn't told his wife. She wasn't sure which yet. That was, she said quietly, a separate problem she was dealing with. "I'm not calling to cause trouble," she said. "I'm calling because you deserve to know what's actually happening before you make any decisions." And because she stopped, "I know they've done this before. I've heard enough to know I'm not the first time they've used him to get to you." I was quiet for a long moment. "What made you decide to call?" I finally said. "Because I looked you up," she said. "And I saw your work, and I thought she built something real. She deserves to know the truth." A pause. "And because I would want someone to call me." We talked for almost 2 hours. She told me things I hadn't known, that my parents had borrowed money from my brother's business account twice without telling her, that my brother was not as passive in all of this as he appeared, but that he was also genuinely under a kind of pressure from them that she was only beginning to understand, that she had suggested couples therapy, and he had refused so far because he didn't want to involve outsiders in family business. I told her about the $11,400. She was quiet for a long time after that. "I want to meet you," she said. "In person. If you're open to it." I drove to Columbus 2 weekends later. I told no one. I parked at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the address she'd texted me, sat in my car for 10 minutes, and then went inside. She was already there. She stood up when I walked in, and there was a moment where we both just looked at each other, 2 women who had been circling the same gravity for years, without ever actually speaking. She had a folder. I had my own. We sat down and we spread everything out on the table between us. And for the next 3 hours we built a picture together that neither of us could have built alone. She had bank records showing 2 unauthorized withdrawals from the business account, both made when my brother was traveling for work. She had text screenshots where my mother had coached her on what to tell me if I called asking questions. She had a voicemail where my father had told my brother that I was probably just waiting for a reason to send money and they just needed to give her the right story. I had my 8 years of records. Every date, every amount, every stated reason. I had the original texts and voicemails. I had the messages where my mother had promised repayment. I had receipts. Together, it wasn't just a sad family story. Together, it was a pattern. My brother met us at the coffee shop at 3 o'clock. She had told him we were meeting. He walked in and he saw both of us sitting at the same table, and something moved across his face that I hadn't seen on him before. He sat down across from us. He didn't speak first. Neither did I. His wife placed the bank records on the table between them. "Before you say anything," she said quietly, "I need you to look at these." He looked, his jaw tightened. He looked up at me. "I didn't know about the surgery story," he said. "I need you to know that. When Mom called me and said she'd been asking you for money, I thought she'd asked you for a general loan. I didn't know what she'd told you. Did you know she was asking me at all?" A long pause. "I knew she was going to reach out to you. I thought she was just going to try to repair things. I didn't ask what she was going to say." It wasn't a full denial and it wasn't a full confession. It was the complicated, uncomfortable truth of someone who had been letting things happen around him for a long time without asking enough questions. I understood that more than I wanted to. "I need to know something," I said, "and I need you to answer me honestly." He nodded. "Did you ever know about the money they took from your account?" He was quiet for 4 seconds. I counted. "I knew about one of them," he said. "Dad told me after the fact. He said it was an emergency. I didn't want to make it a thing." His wife looked at him. He didn't look back at her. I got the feeling this was a conversation that was going to continue long after I left. We stayed at that coffee shop until nearly 6. By the end of it, we had agreed on 3 things. First, I was not sending $15,000, or any other amount, to my parents. Not then. Not in response to any future emergency story that didn't come with verifiable documentation I could confirm independently. Second, My brother was going to confront my parents about the withdrawals and require repayment on a documented schedule. His wife was implementing controls on the business account that would require both their signatures for any transfer over $200. Third, we were going to communicate directly from now on, my brother, his wife, and me. No messages passed through our parents. No information about my finances shared with them. No more stories told in anyone's name without that person's knowledge. My brother called my parents that evening. I wasn't there for it, but his wife was, and she texted me afterward. He told them. Mom cried. Dad denied the surgery thing and said they might have exaggerated. Brother held the line. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I read that text standing in a parking garage in Columbus, about to get in my car and drive back to Chicago. I stood there for a minute, with my phone in my hand. Something. That was more than I'd had 8 years ago, loading 2 suitcases into my car in the dark. My parents called me 3 days later. My mother started the call by saying she was heartbroken that I had gone behind everyone's back to meet with my brother's wife, which was an interesting way to describe 2 women comparing notes on being lied to. My father said the surgery story had been a miscommunication, and that the core issue was real even if the details were wrong, and that family was supposed to help each other. I let them finish. Then I said, I have a record of every dollar that has gone from my account toward this family since I was 24 years old. It totals $11,400. I was told each time it was a loan. None of it has been repaid. I want to be clear that I'm not angry. I'm stating facts. Silence. Going forward, I said, if there is a genuine emergency, I am open to discussing it. But I will need documentation that I can verify independently. I won't be sending money based on phone calls. My father said I had become cold. My mother said she didn't recognize me. I know, I said. I've changed a lot since I left. I'll send you my address. You're welcome to visit if you want to rebuild this. I have not received a visit. I have received 2 more requests for money in the 14 months since that conversation. One for a home repair, one described vaguely as a tax situation. Both came with significantly more documentation than before, which tells me they understood I was serious. Both times the amounts were smaller. Both times I said no, and offered instead to help them contact a nonprofit credit counseling service I had researched. They have not taken me up on that offer. My brother and I text now, not often, but consistently. He came to Chicago in the spring, just him and his wife, and we had dinner at a restaurant near my apartment. We talked for 4 hours. He said at one point, somewhere around dessert, that he had spent most of his adult life feeling like the weight of our family's hopes was a gift he had to be grateful for, and that it had taken a long time to understand it was also a cage. I told him I understood more than he knew. His wife squeezed my arm when we said goodbye on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. Same time next year? She said. I said yes. I still keep records. Not out of suspicion anymore, just out of habit. The same way you keep a lock on your door, not because you expect trouble, but because it's wise to be thoughtful about what you let in. I built my life by being precise and clear-eyed, and I don't intend to stop now. My apartment is quiet in the mornings. I make coffee, and I sit at my desk, and I open whatever project I'm working on, and I feel, genuinely, and without performance, like someone who belongs to herself. That's not nothing. That is, in fact, the whole thing. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or found yourself keeping records just to confirm your own reality, tap the like button. It helps more people find these stories. And drop a comment below. Have you ever had someone unexpected become your greatest ally? I'd love to hear it.